Welcome back. I'm Connie Sokol, your host, and it is a joy to have our guest today. We are going to be talking about the truth of body image, media, and divine royalty. How do those all go together? We're going to tell you because we have the expert today. I am so excited for you to hear what she has to share. It is Dr. Sarah Coyne. Sarah, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
It's such a joy because we're going to go through what is truth, what is culture, what is sort of pulp fiction, if you will, of all the things to do with the body image, the impact on it, culturally, doctrinally, all the things. So we're going to be talking about a variety of things and especially how this affects us as parents of girls. And this affects boys and girls as well. But today we're going to focus on women and girls because of particular few reasons, this royalty, this princess culture, and the superhero culture, just how this impacts them from a very young age. And Sarah has done some beautiful studies on that we're going to touch on as well. So let's dive right into this because the first thought I had was, well, let's full disclosure. My daughter has you as a professor at BYU in her class, Eternal Families, and she loved it. She loves it all the time. She comes and she tells me these things that she's learning. And as she was telling me these things, I thought, this is powerful. It's got to get out there more to women and to these girls. So for you, growing up, how did media impact you? And how is this kind of rooted in you, a desire to study about this very thing?
So I think every woman has such a journey around body image. And I don't think there's any woman out there that just has always felt amazing about their body throughout their entire life and has never struggled with feelings of self-worth or critical views or all of that, right? So as a teenager, I was like kind of the ugly kid, which I think everyone should be the ugly kid because you learn like important life lessons, right?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
But yeah, the nerdy kind of ugly kid. And I felt very low about myself for a long time. But yeah, I went to school, started studying media. I actually started studying media and aggression. And so spent many years doing, violent video games and things like that. And then I will never forget this. We were at the Seattle Space Needle with my family. And my daughter at the time was 3 years old. And she looked up at me and she said, "Mommy, do you think I'm too fat?" And I'm like, "What? No, like, oh my gosh, I can't even," right? So my 3-year-old, like, "Where did you get this? I'm really careful about what I say." And, all the things that run through your mind. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have to study body image. Like I need to know all the things to help my daughter. And then also, to help the world try to. So
that is fantastic. I remember being with my son who was probably 10 at the time. And we were at, the mother-son Foursquare thing. They have an elementary school kind of an events. And we're doing the Foursquare thing. And I had a woman on the other side of me who had, I will simply say, unnatural body proportions. Anyway, he looked at me and he goes, "Mom, you're fat, but I love you anyway." And I was a size 10 at the time. And that was with having like 6 kids at the time. And I was like, dude, so we had a great opportunity for a conversation about bodies and what they can look like and things you're allowed to say out loud, your opinions. So as you have studied this with the body image and then the impact on women and girls, this starts so young, like you're saying, your 3-year-old. I don't know about you as a parent, you have 4 children. I feel like I am pushing upstream. I am swimming upstream against this media influence. What are some of the biggest media influence factors for these kids? Where are they getting these body image things?
kind of depends on the age of the child, right? With young children have great body image for the most part, right? So 3, 4, 5-year-olds have great body image. We've done some research with Disney princess culture to find out maybe that's where this all starts. And we actually find that it doesn't have a negative effect at all on body image. And in fact, as we follow them over time, it actually has a positive one.
Relief. Okay.
So yeah, we can still keep watching Elsa, I guess. That's all right. But certainly the media starts sending messages from a very early age of the thin ideal, right? The same body that's portrayed over and over and over again. So, we're just fed heaps of it from a very young age throughout our entire lives, right? And then around adolescence, that's when social media starts becoming much more popular, right? Anyone with a teenager knows that they spend probably a good amount of time on whatever site they're on. And there's so much research out there about the impact of social media, specifically on body image in young girls, and can be pretty worrisome. So girls who have high social comparisons, so that's like girls who are constantly comparing themselves with others online, tend to have the greatest negative impacts of body image. But it depends on what they're following, right? So let's say they're following like body positivity sites, like that research has a good effect, or or if they're commenting good things, or if they have low social comparison. So it's not as straightforward of just like hours spent on social media equals bad body image. It's pretty mixed.
That is so good to know, because that was a question that I had for you, is how do we as parents help combat that? And what I'm hearing you say is helping our kids be more intentional about what sites they are on. It's not just take the phone or take them off social media. It's choose wisely, that Indiana Jones thing, right? Choose wisely which ones they want to be on. And maybe having conversations about, when you are done on this site, how do you feel? What thoughts are in your head? Any suggestions for engaging in conversations that can take what they've learned in the studies and be able to actually translate into, we have healthy social media habits?
I love everything you said. So all of the questions you just said are spot on. And I would actually recommend parents start doing this themselves first, because we're not in the habit of doing that, right? And we can be just as impact body image, self-esteem, depression, all those things, right? And so there's some research about mindfulness in media. I think that's what you were getting at. So just being really aware of how media is making you feel in the moment. And there's no judgment, right? We're humans, we compare, but just, when is social media making me feel really good about myself and connected to others? And then when is it not? Is it certain sites I'm following or certain people I'm following? If so, maybe unfollow. Is it time? Is it that, I'm reaching a certain amount of saturation and my brain is just, I can't think. And now I'm feeling, bad about myself, or whatever it is. And then just be a little more intentional and choosy. So as parents, right, getting into the habits yourself, and then having those exact same conversations with your kids, especially when they're, before they're getting on social media, just before, that like 11, 12, 13, that age is so important to teach good critical media skills.
And I love how you said that, critical media skills. I think this is a great family night discussion, and not just a one-timer around the kitchen table. I love your idea, and the things that you're saying are making me think this needs to be like an ongoing dialogue. Like, I saw this, or what did you guys see on social media this week that was positive, uplifting? Anything that was disturbing, or anything that just made you feel low, or something like that. I'm liking this idea. I think that's a good kitchen table mealtime kind of a throw it out there, not heavy, not a PowerPoint, but just keeping that as a normal dialogue, a norm. Are you seeing in the studies that you're doing, you do extensive studies and you've done fabulous ones, lots of papers. In fact, you're an award-winning professor. I loved that. I'm in education, and I love that you were actually the most influential professor award in School of Family Life. I thought that was beautiful. Do you see in your studies that there's like a sweet spot of screen time? And like we said, just understanding that it's intentional sites, even good sites. I know I get weary of just being on a screen. Is there some sweet spot there for us to watch out for with kids?
So we're actually doing a study on this right now. We've just submitted it, so it's not published yet, but it's incredibly complicated. And there's not a sweet spot, because it depends on the kid. So for example, we find that there's two groups of kids, both really high risk for depression. And if one group is on, say, 3 hours of social media, it makes their risk higher. But if, that a different group, but still really high risk, is on it for no hours a day, then that makes the risk higher. And so like for that group, 1 to 2 hours is a sweet spot. But it really, really depends on the kid. And so time is actually not a great predictor of many things. It's the way that you use social media in particular. So for example, there's a lot of research about the difference between active and passive use. So passive use is when you're just scrolling, right? You're not really thinking, you're not commenting. That tends to be related to higher levels of depression. If you're using it in active ways, like even just commenting something kind, actually lowers depressive symptoms. So you and I could spend the same hour on social media and have widely different responses depending on the context of what we're doing and what we're seeing, who we're engaging with, and so on.
Oh, I love that. And what that says to me, it's the why, what, and how of social media. Why are we on there? What is it we're choosing to be on? And how are we using it? Right. I love this. This is really insightful, because what that makes me think of is then what's the impact on my child? I notice certain children, and this is really bringing this to light for me. Just like you said, one child can be on for X amount of time or X amount of sites, and they're fine. In fact, they even feel they've got ideas. They had how to make biscuits and 3 ingredients, right? And they're all excited. Now they're going to go use that and start baking that. And that's what one of my girls did. But I can also tell when my 9-year-old has been on too much, and I can tell he's getting irritable, he's getting whatever. And then I'm like, we're done. We're going to go outside. We're going to go play football or whatever we need to do. So I love this as parents, being intuitive about the way that our kids are acting, and maybe being a little bit more aware of the nuances of when they're on social media and when it's done, like when you're done. So I love that. Now let's actually kind of segue into video gaming. You've done studies on that as well. I know different moms that I talk to, because I talk to a lot of moms, been doing speaking stuff for over 20 years. And I hear a lot from different moms about, I just let them do it because it's too hard to fight against it. And, oh, studies aren't really clear about how much it actually impacts them. And this child didn't even seem to have, it didn't even phase them. So kind of along the lines of what you're saying, what have you seen with video gaming and violence and that connection?
But just like all media, video game is just a tool, right? It can be used as a tool for good or for bad. There's a whole journal called Video Games for Health, and it, study after study after study about the positive impacts of video games for cognitive functioning, attention, pro-social behavior, connection, right? All these good things. Okay. But then on the flip side, there's also research about video game violence and how that can lead to aggressive behavior. And then what kind of keeps me up at night is the stuff on video game addiction. I've done a lot of research on that. So, and it's only about, I'd say 7 to 10% of gamers, but it's the idea that I cannot function in my real life because of my relationship with video games. And that can be pretty devastating to a marriage, to a parenting relationship, school, work, all of those things. So kind of understanding the symptoms of a video game addiction, watching out for those, I think is really important for parents.
And do you have any tips on signs of addiction? Because, some kids are like, oh, but I want to play. But then when you can switch their gear and distract, like, oh, let's go play football, or, hey, we're all going to the park. Oftentimes kids will be like, oh yeah, that sounds great. So they want to go do something else, and distraction is helpful. But are there some kind of symptoms or signs that we should be like, this is more than just, I really like to play my video games?
Yeah, because most kids are in that category.
Yeah,
hey,
sure.
I like video games. I want to play, like they're fun, right? Obviously. So inability to disconnect on a regular basis. Salience is another one where all I can think about, all I can talk about, all I ever want, right? So kind of an obsession with video games. If you have a lot of lying around it, a lot of conflict with parents, with family, with friends, and then kind of like withdrawal symptoms. And so like, there's a lot of research to suggest, kids who are addicted, they stop playing, they experience physiological withdrawal symptoms. So highly, highly irritable. You might notice, actual physiological symptoms happening. And then tolerance is the other one. So they need more and more and more to kind of get the same effect over time. So those are just some of them.
That's
so if you have a majority, then you might want to look into what's going on.
Get to that. That's funny. I remember seeing a family that was talking about helping their child, and he had threads of Asperger's, and he actually was so angry he bit his iPad because it was making him into a different person, and he couldn't let go. And they said once they weaned him off, they said he's a different person. It's like we have our child back. So this is a real thing. I love that you're bringing this up of pay attention to this. And I don't think we need to be freaked out about every one of our children is addicted, but it sounds to me like what you're saying is different children have a propensity for that, just like for sugar or for other things, that addictive propensity, just being able to watch out for that and then being able to nip that in the bud. I love, oh my gosh, my mind is just popcorning with all these roads that we could go on. I want to go back to the whole body image, because I know this is something that so many women I talk to, they are concerned about it for themselves as well as for their daughters. And, we as moms don't even realize sometimes what we're saying comes out of our mouths that is influencing our daughters. So on the studies that you have done with body image and media, has there been key factors to watch out for that have come to light for you? I know there's probably many or several, but are there top ones that you're like, I wish moms knew this about media and to watch out for this?
About media specifically. Um, so media definitely has an impact. I think we would be naive to think it doesn't. But what's really compelling for me is the positive stuff. Because I think when we can have conversations about media, we always focus on the negative, like, oh, media is ruining our kids, it's destroying our world. So this body positivity movement that's come out is just phenomenal. And so, if you feel bad about yourself, if your daughter feels bad about yourself, your son or whatever, look into that. There's all sorts of Instagram sites about body positivity. The Kite Sisters, More Than a Body, right? Beauty Redefined. Like, it's just such good content, so good. And then the other thing that I would talk about, our studies find that parent body image is a pretty good predictor of child body image.
Wow.
So yes, like this is definitely something, right, to work on and to think about. And the research suggests that if you can think of your body as this and then talk about your body as this to your kid, right? That my body, like I love my body for what it can do instead of what it looks like. So that's like what we focus all the time with my own daughter, right? She's got like these tremendous legs that her friends were once like, you have really fat legs. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like your legs are gorgeous because you can do back handsprings and you can run and you can kick a soccer ball like a beast. And like, you need those strong legs because you can do all those things, right? And so it's a little bit changing the way we talk. Instead of just saying, oh my gosh, you're so pretty, you're so cute, you're so adorable, stuff like that. It's not about appearance. It's about the heart. And which we know this, but we still mess up all the time.
Yeah. And the words that come out. And I notice that even when I'm seeing one of their daughters that I'm meeting for the first time, I'm like, oh, you're so lovely or whatever. Right. But I love that specificity of training our kids to see the beauty in what our bodies, the functionality of it, and the wonder that we can do these things. I mean, she's probably got legs that are the envy of gymnasts, right? And everybody we've talked about that with the Olympics of different sports and how different body types are more natural and actually beautifully suited to that sport, like a Michael Phelps, who was built for swimming.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you wanted a swimmer's body to be Olympic material, that's the body shape that you would want to have. And we talked about that. So I love being able to help them to see themselves and seeing ourselves in terms of what our body can do and appreciating it and having gratitude for our body. So I'm hearing that that's a big thing to focus on, is the gratitude and the appreciation of it. Is there anything else that you find helps women and girls specifically really shift that gear, really shift the way that they see themselves?
It depends on the individual. I'll talk about some research that we're working on right now, and I can share how it helps shift for me, right? So we're doing a study right now about body image and Latter-day Saint culture and doctrine, and kind of what's not great and what's great, right? Again, like most things, it's such a mixed bag.
Oh yeah.
And one of my favorite findings from the study is that a belief of an embodied Heavenly Mother is extremely beneficial for women in terms of their body image. So women who are saying, that's my belief, tend to have much stronger body image than those who don't. And I love that finding because I've seen that in my own life. Like most women, I've been on a journey with my own body image, and I've done a variety of things, be a critical media consumer, focus on my whole self and my talents or, whatever, as opposed to what I look like. But what really tipped the scale was developing a relationship with and coming to know my Heavenly Mother. And that was the most healing thing I have ever done, because I truly believe my body was patterned after hers. And that is important to me. And I felt like such a beautiful connection with the feminine divine. And I found my own power. And I don't know, it just helped me love this body. So, with all its flaws, right? So much more
Perceived flaws. Yes.
I ever had in my entire life. So that was a fun one.
I think that's such a beautiful term, the feminine divine, because we see that. In fact, who was it that gave that quote about angels? And was it Brigham Young? I'll have to look at it and we'll put it in the show notes. But he said, if you saw an angel, she would be everything charming and graceful and all those things. And what's interesting to me is that doesn't mean that someone, like, I thought, well, then how can I be more charming and graceful and lovely? Like, I want to be a lovely, praiseworthy, of good report, right? And then I started looking around and seeing that there's loveliness and grace in all things, in my daughter's athleticism, in her movement, in dance, and in volleyball. She loves both. And she's able to sort of expand and incorporate and involve a variety of ways of being that feminine divine, of being able to be lovely and graceful in the things that she does. So I love that you found that connection. And I think that is a huge piece for women in making peace with their body, and not just tolerating our body, but really connecting with it and being able to see, wow, I am a daughter of God, and I'm of divine heritage. And you talk a lot about that with the royalty piece. Let's go into that for a minute. You did your PhD in Preston, England. I'm from Scotland. Love the British world. Oh my gosh, my mom was all about the weddings, Princess Di, and all the royalty. She knew all the things about all that was going on, and it's just beautiful. Anyway, we went to Windsor Castle. We saw the crown jewels too that you were talking about in the BYU devotional. When women understand that divine, what do you see shifts for them? I don't know if you have studies on it or if you've just seen it in your own realm. When women make that connection of, oh my goodness, I am even more than the British royalty. I am actually from heavenly parents. And I love how the young women theme has included that, heavenly parents. What do you see shifts for them when they start to get it? And do you have any ways of helping them to get to that realization?
That's a big question, but yeah, let me see if I can tackle it. So the research study that I just talked about also addressed that very thing, right? So women who truly believe they're a child of God, so really believe in their divine identity, have a full understanding of how they fit in the plan of salvation, tend to have better body image because they kind of understand, have an eternal perspective on the soul and the body and what that means to them and how they fit into this. So that seems to matter. And the other finding I love that comes out really, really strongly is that those that have a really strong belief in the atonement of Jesus Christ also tend to have better body image. The master, physician, the great healer himself, I think is just so beautiful. So like there's some really beautiful pieces of our doctrine when you can connect with them in a really personal way that's helpful.
Yes.
Other things though, like some more of the culture, like we've done these studies about culture, like every ward kind of has a culture. So wards that aren't very diverse or that are a little more judgmental or have a lot of cosmetic surgery tend to have worse body image among their members. And so you said, what can we do? I think there's an individual thing that you can work on yourself, right? And there's so many things that you can, look to, but there's also like a cultural piece where we're not maybe having these conversations and looking at our wards at kind of this internal level. Another thing that I know I'm rambling, but I'm so excited. There's
great.
So
I love this research.
Yeah. We've got some really, really interesting things around like the way we talk about modesty. I know that's like a hot topic. It's a mixed bag. So if youth were taught like the principles of modesty, so like humility and confidence, like things like that, right? They tend to have better body image. But if they're taught like really focus on the practices of modesty, like
how long
hemlines, and like shoulders not showing, and like things like be modest so men won't have bad thoughts, all those things. Statistically, they have worse body image. Wow. And that like blows my mind, right? So like we can do such a better job teaching all of these things that I've talked about in a religious context to our youth, and then also finding healing around some of these things for ourselves.
That's gorgeous. And what have you found is a good way to teach it? Because you have all those lessons. We've all had them sitting in, classes where they're like, they go through the measurements even, and they show examples of do's and don'ts and things like that. And that's what these girls remember. And then a girl wears a little bit shorter skirt and people are looking sideways at her, and Allah. So any tips that you have for someone who's in a calling that's listening, or for their own daughters, how to approach that? You are gorgeous and you are beautiful and you are divine, and dress that way to acknowledge your divine identity of who you are and expressing that. What are some ways that we can do that?
So free resources I'd lead people to. So Julie Hanks has got some awesome stuff on this. Beauty Redefined, the Kite Sisters. I think they have an entire modesty lesson that you can access. And then I'm blinking on the third one that I just was thinking maybe they'll come to me. But all of the things, right? So, At Last She Said It. At Last She Said It is another podcast that really tackles this in a really great way. So talk about the principles of modesty, right? And so like modesty is not about girls' dress. Like it's so much more. You can have a modest house or an immodest house. You can have a modest car. You can have an you can speak modestly. You can, right? But yet we like really winnow it down to just what girls dress. And that's how we teach our girls and our boys. So like avoid that to begin with. Talk about wider principles. And something we talk about with my own daughter is like, please wear things that make you feel good in the activity at hand. So
and
like,
that makes sense.
It makes sense.
I'm sorry. I mean, that we've had young women who tell me that they were told on a lake swimming experience to wear jeans in the water so they could be modest. Jeans
Don't do that
in the water. Like that's a hazard. Now I'm not dissing on people because people are going with the best thought that they had at the time. But I love the point that you make. It's an appropriate dress for the appropriate activity. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. And it's going to look different if you're playing tennis or swimming or yoga or at church or hanging out with friends, all of the different contexts. So those are some things that I would focus on.
I love that. And I love the idea of teaching those principles of asking them questions. I feel like more than ever, this emphasis on with teenagers and young adults who really don't want to be told a lot, we're having to ask more questions, which is beautiful. And I love the research that you're finding out so that as parents can get aware, what is the impact? What do I need to do differently? Then we can ask our kids, what do you feel about that? How does that look for you? What does a modest way of being look like for you? And I love that you bring up, you can have a modest house or immodest house. There's a feel to what we wear. I can be wearing absolutely modest clothes and maybe somebody thinks that I'm not wearing modest enough, but somebody else could be wearing something completely modest, but behave in a way that gives off feelers that are totally different. But it doesn't matter necessarily what that dress is in that scenario. So again, it goes back to bookending in my mind, what you're saying with social media and with the things that people are doing. There's not a cookie cutter, it sounds like. It really is the intention and the feel that we have with it. Would you say that's about right?
Absolutely. Like you and I could be wearing the same exact piece of clothing, and one of us could be modest and one of us could not be modest. And that would probably blow people's minds, right?
Yeah,
depending on intentions and the way you're acting and all of the things, right? And yeah, this is incredibly complex and complicated. I've studied media for 20 years now, and body image and all of the things, and it's incredibly nuanced and complex. And I think that's okay as parents to say that, right? It's not about just taking off the phone or just please be on social media less hours.
Yeah, less screen time or whatever.
Yeah, less screen time. And that's what I hear in all the schools. Okay, well, if we could just get our kids to put down their phone and have less screen time, this would all be fixed. And according to research, that's not accurate, right? So it's about empowering, educating, and yeah, just teaching.
And exemplifying. And I love that you bring up and being involved. What I keep hearing you say is being involved with our kids, being involved with this in the sense of we're aware, we know what's going on. We're not just given an ultimatum. Okay, 3 hours of screen time and then the buzzer goes off and you're done, right? We're engaged with what they're doing. I know my 9-year-old, I'm happy for him to play on football game things because we're playing it and he's learning. And then we go out and we throw the ball. Now, not every single time, but we're doing it a lot and he's learning different ways to hold the ball and things like that. So like you said, there's positives to the things on social media. There's positives to the things of the modesty discussions and the principles and things like that. But it sounds like, once again, like President Nelson said, it comes down to purpose and identity, and it comes down to us being purposeful about what we're doing. So I want to add on too, I loved in your BYU devotional, and we'll put it in the show notes, but the listeners, I want you to know it's fabulous. It's so good. It's the fantasy and the reality of our royalty. Is that it?
Royal identity, I think.
The royal identity. I'll have it in the show notes, but it was so good. And you talked about what this, to draw it in, what I'm hearing you say is it comes down to who we really are as a person and what we really want. And that's our intention. That's the why. It will decide the what, it'll decide the how. And you were talking about this idea of fairy tale love, right? You did a study on princesses and superheroes, and you were talking about Elder Bednar gets asked a lot, well, how will I know the right person for me? And how will I know? And young girls are growing up and they have their lists and then their reception colors that they want and their wedding dress thing, right? But the thing that he made the point and you made the point was, be the princess, be the one that you're looking for, be the person that you are seeking. It's not a shopping list. So what's your thoughts on that as far as for you're teaching young adults right now in your classes at BYU? What are you teaching them as far as for preparing for marriage and parenting? And they're going to pass on this legacy. What do you teach them about this for their own image, body, self, all of that they're going to pass on?
You have a whole semester to listen. I mean, that's a big question. How to narrow it down to a couple sentences. Okay. So for me, this life is about growth and becoming. And so it is okay. It is expected that you are not where you should be right now. You're not meant to be perfect in this life. That is okay in terms of body image, in terms of grades, in terms of social, fill in the blank. That's okay. So this life is about growth and becoming. And when I think about who I want to become, my life it's really complicated right now. We're going through some really, really hard things in my personal family. And so I've had to really contemplate, who do I want to be? Why am I here? Yeah. And, amidst all of the hard things, I just keep coming back to Jesus Christ. And I just think, if I can love as he loves, if I can act as he acts, as I can be as he was, then it's a good life. And I don't always get it right. But when things are complex and messy, because this life and even religion is really messy, frankly, that's my core value. Is love as Jesus Christ loves. And when things are complicated for me, I keep coming back to that phrase. And that's what's driving me right now. And who knows in the future, but that feels like a good mantra right now.
That's fantastic. And I think that is when we clear away. I know Elder Ballard has said that, of just simplify, keep it simple. We make it more complicated than it needs to be. And I think it does come down to that core as a parent, as a sister, as a wife, as whatever, just coming down to that love as Jesus Christ would love, and studying him will help us to have that better body image, that will help us to know what kind of sites to go on, that will help us to know the divine royalty that we have within. I think that is beautiful. And that is absolutely core. And again, minus a lot of these do's and don'ts. It just goes back to that really core principle. I know our time, we need to wrap up, but I did want to touch on really quickly on this smorgasbord today. You have pursued your education and higher education, and now in teaching at BYU. That journey, and we talked a little bit beforehand. I know Ava Weitzman has talked about that in her Women in Education, A Future Only God Could See. What has that experience taught you that would be helpful for us as women and who are moms of daughters? What are some of the things you've learned about pursuing your higher education that you would want us to know to make this a better process for the women that are coming?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm so glad you got to talk to Ava. She's a good close friend of mine. I look up to her a lot. So in my devotional, I quote Ruth Renlund. It's one of my favorite quotes. She says, "There's no one way to be an LDS woman." And frankly, there's no one way to be an LDS man either. And when we think about our futures, we're often socialized to believe there's only one path, right? You know, motherhood of 10 kids and stay at home mom, you know, whatever it is. And maybe that is your path. Maybe that's good. But there's so many different ways to be a righteous follower of Christ in this life. For me, I was always prompted to get my education and to get as much education as I could. My plan was to be a stay-at-home mom, but life happens. And like it didn't work out the way I expected. And now I work full-time, and my husband was a stay-at-home dad for many years, you know, breaking every Utah County stereotype in the book and getting all the comments and all the things. But, you know, I just have found so much peace in this future only God could see for me, right? And to trust in the Lord and trust in the promptings that I've had to do what I do at BYU. Every time I'm like, this is hard. I don't want to do this. I don't want to quit. Like, I just keep getting this secret, this soft, you know, feeling like this is where you need to be. Like, they need to see strong, competent women at BYU. Like, that is important for my sons and my daughters there.
That's so gorgeous. And you see President Nelson just encouraging women, just flourish. You have all the tools, whatever God's answer is for you, hear it and do it, right? Was there a moment for you that maybe it was a difficult time and you were at that switch point of, I don't want to do this anymore, but was there a moment where you're like, I know this is my path? Was there a moment like that for you?
Yes, there was. So I spent like a decade of like significant mommy guilt, right? I had all these like young children and I'm working and the church says don't, and you're just like, wah! Like, am I screwing up my family? What's going on? And the year I gave the devotional, I think it was 2015, I also got asked to present some research on social media up to a committee at church headquarters, which involved President Holland or Elder Holland, as part of it, right? And I'm like freaking out, right? And I think like when they asked me, I'm like, I think I peed a little. That's what I said when they asked me, right?
Completely really understandable. Yeah.
I know. So I go up to the meeting and it's like me in high heels and like this yellow cardigan and this little skirt and like 30 men in black suits, like most intimidating, and Elder Holland right in the middle, right? So I'm like, okay, here we go. So I get up there and I give my little spiel about the research I'd been doing for the last, decade on social media and adolescence, and some ideas about what the church could do in terms of their own social media feeds and so on. And Elder Holland looked at me and he has those, piercing blue eyes. And he just said, Sarah. And I felt very known, right? And heard, and he said, Sarah, and then he looked around, he said, how can we do this? How can we make this happen? This is fantastic stuff. And then we had like another half an hour just conversation about what that might look like in practice. And I remember driving home and I called my husband and I said something like, every doubt I had ever had about who I was and pursuing my education and being a working woman in the church, all those doubts, I'm just done with them. I said, I'm done, because I know I'm doing what I need to, because when an apostle of the Lord said, hey, I need your brain for something, I could say, absolutely, I got you. And then I said, and you know what? I shouldn't have needed an apostle to validate my life choices. That should have come from within. And so from that moment on, I literally was done, just questioning myself and my journey and just embracing it. It was a really powerful moment for me.
Oh, and that sounds like it shifted. Yeah. You took that energy and just focused on what you needed to do for you, your family, and the things that God wants you to do. And you're going.
Yep. Yeah. It was a real turning point for me in my life.
Oh, I just got goosebumps. Absolutely gorgeous. I always wish we had another half hour on these. It's just absolutely beautiful. I know listeners are going to be thinking the same thing, which is, where can I get more of all this good stuff? What's the best way for them to reach you?
I just got a website. It's Sarah M. Coyne, byu.edu, I think, or they can just email me if they want to talk I'd be happy to chat with whoever.
That's fantastic. We will have both of those in the show notes so that you can reach her easily. And as I said before, I recommend you watch the BYU devotional. Really beautifully done. Great information. It's a go back and listen to it again, kind of a devotional. So good. Thank you so much for sharing your research, your time, your talents, your abilities, your expertise, and in such a beautiful, down-to-earth manner. It's just so fun. It feels like you could sit on the couch and just talk with you. No judgment, just understanding and awareness. And then what do you want to do with it? Absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Coyne. I appreciate being on.
Thank you. And for those listening, as always, if you like these interviews, go below, rate, review, and subscribe, and check out our other goodies that we have on ConnieSokol.com with our retreats, our leadership circle, and helping you become an influential writer, speaker, and media presence for him.